Hello, everyone. I'm Rod Hughes with Kimball Hughes Public Relations, and I'm joined today by Bernd Heinze, Executive Director of the Federation of Defense and Corporate Counsel. Bernd, why don't you tell the folks tuning in a little bit about yourself?
Hey, Rod. Thanks, everybody. How are you? Good to see you all. Pleasure to be here. Thanks for the opportunity, Rod. The Federation of Defense and Corporate Counsel is an international professional trade association that represents attorneys, a defense counsel, corporate counsel, and insurance industry representatives from around the world. And we have 5 other trade associations that we also represent here at Accolade Management Services in King of Prussia, Pennsylvania. So we are all in on the association and the foundation game.
So you keep a little bit busy, right, Bernie?
Just a tad. Yeah, it's been a busy year. That is for sure.
Well, speaking of a busy year, the reason I've asked you to be here today is I'd love to talk a little bit about the year we've had, or the 15 months and counting that we've had, and specifically how associations have had to adapt in a pandemic environment. Can you talk a little bit about what these last 15 months have been as someone who operates member-driven associations?
Yeah, and I think you hit the nail on the head, Rod, with the word adapt. And we certainly have had to do that. As most of my association peers and colleagues will recollect, we are in the member service business, and that's connections, networking, in-person meetings, and that all ended on March 16th when Pennsylvania here and many other states went basically on lockdown. So we had to really pivot and re-examine what our strategic purpose was, what our value proposition was, and maybe changing the was to what it could be. Because if we are truly to be honest to our cause and realize that the member dues are really investments in the association, what can we do to return that investment to the members and make the experience better for them? So we really did, like you said, Rod, adapted and pivoted and changed from a lot of in-person meetings to a complete virtual environment. Let me just take a look here. Over the past 15 months, we've had 396 virtual events that have been attended by 19,857 people. So we've had an average of 28.2 events per month, sometimes 3 or 4 a day. And what we've done, and one of the things that was exciting about all this, was that we took a look to see what lawyers and other associations that we represent, what these professionals do every day for a living. And then we said, okay, they may not be doing that much anymore. What else can we do where we can bring value? So we pivoted to the personal side as well. And we took a look at the whole individual, not just as a member, but what they're doing in their family, what they're doing in their hobbies, and had sessions and other experiences in a virtual nature like that for them as well.
Well, and I like how you framed the member dues as an investment. And, I think most folks can relate to the idea that when the market shifts and perhaps the investment universe isn't as positive as everyone would like it to be, there are some challenges that have to be managed. And you've talked about switching to all virtual. Can you elaborate a little bit on some of the challenges that your associations faced, both in the early phase of the pandemic and maybe some ongoing or longer term challenges?
Yeah, sure. It's a good question. I think one of the immediate challenges we had is how do we get out of all these contracts? Because we had cancellation penalties of $400,000, $500,000 in virtual various areas. One was in Bermuda, another one was here in Philadelphia, another one was in California. And we had to go back to those venues and say, hey, listen, we can't come. You may be open, but those were in the early stages when they were still open. But our members weren't traveling. Their companies weren't allowing them to travel. They were hesitant about traveling. No one really knew in the early stages what was really happening. And we were looking for CDC guidance and taking our guidance from that. But I think what we've learned over the long term, Rod, if I had to put it into words, was we need to stop looking at just where we are with the organizations and talk more about where we can be. What else is out there? What more can we do to provide member value based on the collaborative group that we represent everyone has different varying interests. Whenever we hire somebody new, the last question that I always ask a new hire is, what do you like to do in your spare time? Because I would like to learn more about them as an individual as opposed to just what they're going to be doing with us from a professional standpoint. Well, everyone has those personal desires from their family members. In fact, thanks to you and your team, we're going to be putting out on LinkedIn and our other social media posts a new book that we just put together. We contacted 29 of our members and had them write a very short story on how they lived through the pandemic. So we had stories about how babies were born, how when the college kids came home, how to take care of elderly adults, a wedding that had to be rescheduled 5 times before it was finally held. One of our members actually was on a ventilator for 5 months and survived, thank God. But what was that experience like? And they're very compelling stories, and we put them all in a compendium and shared them with all the members, and we're getting great reviews on that. So I think for the long term, what I would suggest is really looking at member retention and the value that we can provide beyond just the due structure. And that's something that we'll continue to be looking at as we transition from being an aircraft carrier to being more of a jet ski, and being able to maneuver those waves and shoals and rocks as they come around. Because my philosophy has always been, when you become complacent, when you become comfortable, it's time to really get worried.
One thing I want to ask you before I let you go, Bernie, you've talked a little bit about some of the lessons learned focusing on philanthropy, focusing on member value, and really thinking about what members are doing in the current environment, not so much what they used to do before the pandemic. What, in your opinion, in the associations you've managed through this crisis, what has changed that you think is going to stay with the operation of member-driven associations going forward? What's the, I hate to use the phrase, but what's the new normal going to look like for associations after this?
Yeah, I don't like using the term new normal. I like using the term new better. And I think what we've learned is that there is a way to be better. We have changed from being an also runner, a horse with blinders on running around a racetrack to try to be first or be competitive, to really taking those blinders off and looking all around us to see where the other opportunities might be, not just for the members, but for the value proposition that the association brings to the table. Second thing is, I think we've taken a little bit of a different view by changing from the strategic perspective that we have as an association or as an association management company, and changing our view to looking at what our members are seeing, what our vendors are seeing, what our sponsors are seeing, what our venues are seeing, and putting ourselves in their shoes. And when we go to have discussions with them, looking and thinking about what their interests are, what they're trying to move ahead with, and how we can be part of that and come to a strategic solution or a resolution of where we are. Everyone so far, thankfully, has been able to work with us. We have not lost a dime. The other thing, I think the third thing that we've learned is that rather than relying upon member dues and non-dues revenue of running meetings, because we're not running them, or we haven't run them that much in the past, we may go to some hybrid events, but they'll be different now. They'll look different. The composition of the people may be somewhat different. So we have to get around looking at ways of doing that somewhat differently. But I think if we look at this long term, we're going to see a way in which we're going to restructure and reformulate the way in which associations can provide value, can provide benefit, and put ourselves in the shoes of the members and look for other ways that are not necessarily directly related to the function of the organization, but still related to the function of the people that make up the organization. And I think that's the focus shift or the paradigm shift that we see going on in the next 5 to 10 years. And with regard to the dues revenue, we are going to operate from a model now where we are not going to be dependent upon meetings to provide additional revenue to fund the organization. Dues, non-due revenue, sponsorship revenue will all be something that will be operational based, and the meetings will have to be budgeted to run themselves.
All good lessons learned. And I particularly liked the piece where you talked about focusing on where your members were, your vendors were. It strikes me as almost being, if you'll forgive the term, an Amazon type model where you're personalizing the experience. And for the up-and-coming professionals entering the various industries that your many associations represent, I would imagine that's fairly attractive because now it's not joining an organization, it's becoming part of an organization that will represent your specific interests.
Yeah,
and that's going to be a huge shift.
Yeah, you're right, Rod. It's sort of like becoming part of a movement, isn't it? It's not just like you rightly said, becoming part of an organization or an association. Look, this is the greatest time to be in the association management business. It's exciting because you don't know what's going to happen next. I get up every morning just to look and wait to see what's going to happen next. We've got such a great team around us. We've got you and your team as one of our business partners, but we really like to have the ability of looking for new opportunities and ways in which we can be of service and give our members something that was unexpected, but still of greater value to them than what they would have expected.
Well, Bernie, I really appreciate the time you've taken today and all the folks at Accolade who have let you take the time. I know you're hopping from meeting to meeting today, as you often are, but I really do appreciate the time. And I'm sure the folks who will be watching this video appreciate the lessons learned as well.
Thanks, Rod. Always a pleasure to be with you. Look forward to seeing you again soon.
Thank you, Bernie.
Thanks, Rod.